you're really focusing on foundational models. That's what jumped out at me from the announcement. That's where a lot of people are putting their activity. Why so focused there?
So we have multiple vehicles. Our core vehicle will be focusing on the application layer. And that's where there's going to be an absolute boom of innovation from business models that are being unleashed that were never possible before. But our core AI fund that we saw in November when GPT was launched. We've been investing in AI for the last 7 years. Several companies that are narrow AI companies that are application based. But when we saw GPT be launched, we realized that this was an absolute breakthrough. And these foundational models are going to be the underpinning of the next absolute transformation for technology. When we first started investing in 2008, 2009, it was right around the mobile revolution, and companies that didn't embrace that in a forward basis really struggled. But it also unleashed extraordinary new business models that never could have existed before. When you had a GPS in your pocket, when you had a camera in your pocket, when you had a radio in your pocket, when you had all of that capability in your pocket, it unleashed these business models that were never possible before. And what's about to happen because of these large transformer models that have such extraordinary output, we're going to see innovation in business models that were never capable before that are about to be launched.
Yes.
And that is just going to be an absolute. And what I said at Milken was that if you were a commerce company 10 years ago and you didn't embrace e-commerce, you're probably not in business anymore. And I firmly believe that if you're a company today and you're not embracing the changes that are taking place with AI, you're going to be behind and you're going to have a hard time catching up.
Ashton, I'm really interested in how quickly you moved on this thematic fund as well. Who are the LPs and how quickly did it come together?
We pulled the fund together in about 5 weeks.
Wow.
And we have an extraordinary, we have a base of LPs that have been with us for years on end. So we have about $1 billion under management at Sound Ventures and have been working with some really extraordinary LPs over the years. And so we reached out to them and said, hey, this is happening now. These large transformer models, a lot of them, you look at OpenAI, you look at Anthropic, you look at Stability, they didn't start yesterday. They've been around for a while. They've been building this. You look at what Google has been doing with DeepMind and Bard, and those companies have been in development for a while. What we've just seen is an extraordinary breakthrough where you can take a massive corpus of data and be able to index through it and create statistical, highly likely outputs that are beneficial to humans. And these utilities are really, really valuable. It is going to exponentially change. I agree with everything that Brian was saying before I came on. This is going to change business forever, and we need to embrace it because right now this AI can be used to improve humanity. I actually look at it as an equity and an inclusion play where, as we commoditize things like legal advice and medical advice and education and personalize those things down to the individual consumer, all of a sudden people that can't get a doctor on the phone or can't get a lawyer on the phone or can't get a pediatrician on the phone, they're going to have access to these services and access to these services at an affordable price.
Yeah.
And I think that's extraordinary for humanity and extraordinary for all of us.
It augments, but you mentioned education there. And I think about your exited portfolio company, Chegg, which lost about half of its market value over the course of the week because already ChatGPT is upending its own business model. What are you doing with your current portfolio, Ashton, to see around this corner to ensure that they are augmented rather than completely disrupted?
So that was the very first thing that we did before we even thought about putting a vehicle together to invest in these things, is we reached out to every one of our portfolio companies and said, how are you embracing this technology? How are you implementing this technology? And I think maybe from from my perspective, the what happened with Chegg the other day is somewhat short-sighted. Chegg is implementing GPT-4 into their product. They announced CheggMate, and I think a lot of the value is going to fall to the incumbents. So if you have an extraordinary product, you have consumers, and you're implementing this, I think value is going to fall to some of those incumbents, and as it should. But and don't dismiss the fact that a lot of these companies have extraordinary data sets that are their own proprietary data sets, and they'll tune their own models on top of these large transformer models, which will create unique value propositions for consumers.
Ashton, the word that keeps coming up time and time again is hype cycle, and being able to see wood for the trees, but also being able to understand that this isn't kind of like crypto, where, yes, there's still ultimate value. We see it with the OGs like Bitcoin, but we have seen an upending in valuations of NFTs, an area that you were playing heavily in. How do you worry about some of the similarities there, and how do you ensure that the same mistakes aren't remade?
Well, I think the biggest mistake that was made in crypto is and still is just the absolute lack of clear-cut regulation, so people know what the rules are that they should be playing by. I think that there were a lot of companies that were assuming that blockchain technology could be used for a lot of different things that it really shouldn't have been used for. Look, it's a public ledger database. So it's really, blockchain's super valuable for any kind of transaction between two parties that don't trust one another. So if two parties don't trust one another, they want to transact out in the open so that everybody can see what that transaction is and have a consistent, constant, historic ledger of those transactions. It's really valuable for that. I actually think for artists that want to have enduring art out in the market and be able to timestamp this new piece of art as, hey, I made this at this date, and everything else that comes after that is derivative of that. It's extraordinarily valuable to have a public ledger for that. Yeah. I think some of the tokenization that was taking place was really short-sighted and pretty manipulative. But the biggest problem was there's been no clear regulation.
But there's no clear regulation for AI either. Is that needed?
Yes, it is needed, and I think that the most promising thing, because by the way, it's not just needed; it's needed badly, and I think that we've seen some extraordinarily intelligent people that have come out and it said it's needed, and we need to really focus on this. I think the companies that are building this recognize that regulation is needed, and I think, and what I'm seeing that's really promising is the founders of these companies, the founders of Stability, the founders of Anthropic, the founders of OpenAI, Google, and otherwise are really forward thinking about what regulation should be, because I don't think anybody wants this to be an unfettered market. Yeah. And I think there are data privacy implications. I think there's what is the value of the data. I think there's misinformation issues. I work really heavily in eliminating child sexual abuse material from the internet. I think that's an issue that needs to be considered. I think biases need to be considered. I think that the traceability of this data needs to be considered. All of these things need to be considered. The good news is that the founders of these companies and the people that are building this technology, they're cognizant of it. They're being proactive about it. They're considering what needs to be done and what good regulation would look like. Because it's really hard if you don't understand how this technology works to understand how to regulate it. And the truth is, there's a lot of people that are fear-mongering on general artificial intelligence, and we're not there. We do not have general artificial intelligence yet. It's getting closer, and we need to be really considering what the implications of that are. But the benefits to society for the utilization of this technology are going to be extraordinary. And what we don't want to do is have it regulated in a way that puts it inside of a box and doesn't allow us to continue to innovate, because this isn't just happening domestically. Right. This is happening all around the world. And the push towards general artificial intelligence is going to happen here. If not here, it's going to happen in China. It's going to happen all over the world. And the implications of it are going to be massive. So
Well
we
said.
don't hamstring ourselves in a way where we are now behind and we're underneath the rock of somebody else's general AI. And so it needs to be done in an intelligent, thoughtful, proactive way. And the good news is that the founders of these companies recognize that, realize that, and are being proactive about it.